Jake Murphy had made many bad decisions in his life, but this one would be the worst. He sat in the grand hall of the vampire ship, staring at the strange red drink in his glass. The liquid seemed to glow in the dim light, and Jake could smell something metallic coming from it. Scared, human? Princess Lirelei Nightshade asked with a cold smile. Her pale skin looked like marble, and her red eyes seemed to burn in the darkness. She wore a black dress that sparkled like stars, and her long silver hair fell past her shoulders like water. Jake looked around the room. The other humans from his ship sat quietly at the long table. Captain Lisa Rodriguez gave him a warning. Look, Dr. Kevin Walsh shook his head slowly. Even Ben Parker, his best friend, looked worried. But Jake had never backed down from a challenge. Not when he was a kid on Earth, not when he joined the Space Navy, and not now when humanity was meeting vampires for the first time. I'm not scared of anything, Jake said. He picked up the glass and took a small sip. The blood wine hit his tongue like fire. It burned going down his throat, and Jake felt his head spin immediately. This was not like any alcohol he had ever tasted. It was 1,000 times stronger than anything humans made. The vampire nobles around the table laughed. They had been drinking the same wine all night, and it did not affect them at all. To them, it was like water. Your kind is so weak, said Lord Vorthik, an ancient vampire with scars on his face. You live for such a short time. Maybe 80 years if you are lucky. We have been alive for thousands of years. Some of us remember when your planet was just rocks and gas, added Lady Seraphina. Her voice sounded like ice breaking. We watched your sun form. Your entire species is younger than my oldest shoes. The other vampires laughed again. Jake felt his face get hot. The blood wine was making him dizzy, but it was also making him angry. At least we do something with our time, Jake said louder. Then he meant to. You guys have been around for thousands of years. And what have you done? You still live in the same old castles. You still wear the same old clothes. You still drink blood like animals. The room went quiet. Even the other humans looked shocked. Nobody talked to vampire royalty like this. Princess Lirelei leaned forward. Her red eyes seemed to glow brighter. What did you say? Jake knew he should stop talking. The smart thing would be to apologize and sit down. But the blood wine was in his system now, and Jake Murphy was not smart when he was drunk. I said you're all boring, Jake continued. You have forever to live, and you waste it. Humans go from caves to spaceships in a few thousand years. What have you done? Nothing new, nothing interesting. You just sit around talking about how great you used to be. Princess Lirelei stood up. She was tall, maybe 6 feet, and she moved like a cat. You dare insult us in our own house? I'm not insulting you, Jake said, standing up too. I'm telling you the truth. You're afraid to change. You're afraid to try new things. You're afraid to take risks. Afraid? The princess laughed, but it was not a happy sound. Human, we are the rulers of 17 star systems. We have conquered species you have never heard of. We are not afraid of anything. Then prove it, Jake said. The words came out before he could stop them. Prove what? Jake felt the room spinning around him. The blood wine was stronger than anything he had ever drunk. His thoughts were getting fuzzy, but his mouth kept moving. Prove you're not afraid to try something new. Prove you're not stuck in the past. I dare you to do something no vampire has ever done before. Princess Lirelei smiled, showing her sharp white fangs. And what would that be? Jake's brain tried to think of something good. Something that would show these ancient creatures that humans were not weak. Something that would prove humans were worth respecting. Marry me? He said. The words hung in the air like smoke. Everyone in the room froze. Captain Rodriguez put her head in her hands. Dr. Walsh dropped his glass. Ben Parker's mouth fell open. Princess Lirelei stared at Jake for a long moment. Then she started laughing. It was a sound like silver bells mixed with breaking glass. "You want me to marry you?" she asked. "Why not?" Jake said, his drunk brain thinking this was a great idea. "You said you're not afraid of anything. But you won't marry a human because we don't live long enough. You won't take the risk. Marriage is sacred to our people," Lord Vorthik growled. "It is not a game." "Then it's perfect," Jake said. "If she marries me, she's doing something new. Something risky. Something that proves vampires can change." Princess Lirelei stopped laughing. She looked at Jake with her burning red eyes. "You think I won't do it?" "I think you're scared," Jake said. The princess was quiet for a long moment. Around the table, the other vampires watched and waited. In vampire culture, a challenge made in front of witnesses was serious business. Very serious. "Interesting," Princess Lirelei said slowly. "A human who thinks he can challenge me." "I'm not challenging you," Jake said. "I'm daring you. There's a difference." The princess walked around the table until she was standing right in front of Jake. She was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Jake could smell something like roses and winter air coming from her skin. "You realize what you're asking?" she said quietly. "Marriage in our culture is binding. Forever. No divorce. No escape. Death cannot break it. Time cannot break it. Not even the end of the universe can break it." Jake's drunk brain tried to process this information. Forever was a very long time. But he had already said the words, and backing down now would make humans look weak. "I know what I said," he lied. Princess Lirelei smiled again. This time it was different. Not cruel, but curious. "Very well, Jake Murphy of Earth," she said. "I accept your dare." Before anyone could stop her, she grabbed Jake's hand. The moment their skin touched, Jake felt something like electricity run through his body. The air around them began to glow with a strange purple light. "By the ancient laws of the Sanguine Empire," Princess Lirelei said in a loud voice, "I bind myself to this human in eternal marriage. Let the stars witness our union." The purple light got brighter. Jake felt like his whole body was on fire, but not in a bad way. It was like every cell in his body was changing, becoming something new. Then the light faded, and Jake fell to his knees. He felt different, stronger. His vision was sharper, and he could hear heartbeats from across the room. The blood wine was no longer making him dizzy. "What did you do to me?" he asked. Princess Lirelei helped him stand up. Her cold skin felt warm. "Now, I made you immortal," she said simply. "You cannot be married to a vampire princess and remain mortal. The magic does not allow it." Jake looked around the room. The other vampires were staring at him with a mixture of shock and interest. The humans looked like they had seen a ghost. "So we're really married?" Jake asked. "Oh yes," Princess Lirelei said. "And now you get to meet my family. They are going to love you." The way she said it made Jake think that love was not the right word at all. Jake woke up in a bed that was bigger than his entire room back on Earth. The sheets felt like silk, but they were black as midnight. Everything in the room was black. The walls, the furniture, even the windows were covered with dark glass. He sat up and immediately felt different. His body was stronger than before. When he moved his hand, it moved faster than it should. When he looked around the room, he could see everything perfectly, even though it was very dark. "You're awake, princess," Lirelei said. She was sitting in a chair by the window, still wearing her black dress from the night before. "How do you feel?" "Different," Jake said honestly. "Like I could run through a wall." "You probably could," she said. "Vampire strength takes some getting used to. Try not to break anything important." Jake stood up and walked to a mirror on the wall. He looked the same, but his eyes seemed brighter. When he smiled, he could see that his teeth were a little sharper than before. "Am I a vampire now?" he asked. "Not exactly," Princess Lirelei said. "You're still human, but the marriage bond changed you. You have some of our abilities, but you can still eat regular food and go out in sunlight. Think of it as an upgrade." Jake nodded. "So what happens now?" "Now you meet my parents," she said. "They want to have dinner with their new son-in-law." The way she said it made Jake's stomach feel cold. "Are they going to try to kill me?" "Probably not on the first day," Princess Lirelei said. "They have manners." An hour later, Jake found himself walking through the biggest castle he had ever seen. The halls were so long he could not see the end of them. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into darkness. Everything was made of black stone that seemed to absorb light. "How old is this place?" Jake asked as they walked. "About 30,000 years," Princess Lirelei said casually. "My father built it when he conquered this star system. He likes to redecorate every few centuries, but he always keeps the same basic design." Jake tried to imagine living in the same house for 30,000 years. Humans had only invented writing 5,000 years ago. This castle was older than all of human civilization. They stopped in front of two huge doors that were covered in strange symbols. The doors opened by themselves, and Jake followed Princess Lirelei into the dining room. The room was enormous. The table in the center could seat 50 people easily. Candles floated in the air above them, giving off a red light that made everything look like it was covered in blood. At the head of the table sat the most frightening man Jake had ever seen. He was tall and thin, with white hair that fell to his shoulders. His skin was pale as paper, and his eyes were like black holes. Scars covered his face and hands, telling stories of battles that happened before humans existed. "Father," Princess Lirelei said, "this is Jake Murphy, my husband." Emperor Vorthik the Undying looked at Jake for a long moment without saying anything. Jake felt like those black eyes could see right through him. "So," the Emperor finally said, "you are the human who dared to marry my daughter." "Yes, sir." Jake sighed, trying to keep his voice steady. "Interesting. In 50,000 years, no one has ever been that stupid before." Sitting next to the Emperor was a woman who looked like she was made of ice and starlight. Her skin was so pale it was almost blue, and her silver hair seemed to move by itself. When she looked at Jake, he felt like winter had walked into the room. "I am Empress Seraphina," she said. Her voice sounded like wind blowing through a graveyard. "I have been looking forward to meeting you." Jake was not sure if that was good or bad. "Please sit," the Emperor said, pointing to a chair across from them. Jake sat down carefully. The chair was made of some kind of black metal that felt cold, even through his clothes. A servant appeared from nowhere and put a plate in front of him. The food looked normal enough, some kind of meat and vegetables, but it was all black and red. "We had our chef prepare something special for you," Empress Seraphina said. "Blood fruit from the crimson gardens of Vela Prime, shadowroot from the dark forests of Umbriel, and the meat of a stellar whale that died in the void between stars." Jake looked at the food and then at his new family. Princess Lirelei gave him an encouraging nod. "Thank you," he said, and took a bite. The food actually tasted good, though it was unlike anything he had ever eaten. The blood fruit tasted like cherries mixed with metal. The shadowroot was like potatoes that had been grown in moonlight. The stellar whale meat was rich and strange, like beef that had been aged in space. "So," Emperor Vorthik said as they ate, "tell us about yourself, human." "Well," Jake said, "I'm 28 years old. I work as a diplomat for the Earth Federation. I grew up in a place called Texas." 28, the Emperor repeated. When I was 28, I was conquering my third galaxy. What have you accomplished? Jake thought about this. I helped negotiate peace between Earth and the Martian colonies. I learned to speak 6 alien languages. I graduated from the Space Academy with honors. The Emperor looked unimpressed. When I was your age, I had already destroyed 3 species that annoyed me. That's nice, Jake said, not sure how else to respond. Empress Seraphina leaned forward. Tell me, child, what do you think of our empire? Jake looked around the room. Everything was dark and expensive and older than anything humans had ever built. It was impressive, but also kind of sad. It's very grand, he said carefully. But? Princess Lirelei asked. She seemed to sense there was more. Jake knew he should probably lie, but something about becoming immortal had made him feel braver. Or maybe stupider. But it seems kind of stuck, he said. The room went very quiet. The servants stopped moving. Even the floating candles seemed to dim. Stuck? Emperor Vorthik asked in a voice that could freeze stars. Well, Jake said, knowing he was probably about to die, you've been around for 50,000 years, right? But this castle looks exactly like every vampire castle in every human movie. Your clothes are the same style they were probably wearing 10,000 years ago. Your technology is advanced, but it's all just improvements on the same old designs. Are you saying we are boring? Empress Seraphina asked. I'm saying you're not growing, Jake said. Humans change all the time. We have to, because we don't live very long. Every generation does things differently than their parents. But you guys are immortal, so you never have to change. You just do the same things forever. Emperor Vorthik stood up slowly. He was even taller than Jake had realized, maybe 7 feet. When he spoke, his voice filled the entire room. You think we should change our ways because a species that has existed for a few thousand years suggests it? I think change keeps life interesting, Jake said, even eternal life. For a moment, Jake thought the Emperor was going to reach across the table and tear his head off. The black eyes burned with anger, and the scars on his face seemed to glow. Then, surprisingly, the Emperor laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was cold and sharp like breaking ice. But it was laughter. Lirelei, he said to his daughter, your husband is either very brave or very stupid. Both, Princess Lirelei said with a small smile. I like him, said a new voice from the doorway. Jake turned to see another vampire walking into the room. This one looked younger than the others, maybe in his 20s, with dark hair and eyes like green fire. He moved like a predator, all smooth and dangerous. This is my son, Prince Demon, Emperor Vorthik said. Your new brother-in-law. Prince Demon sat down next to Jake and grinned, showing his fangs. I heard about your little challenge last night. Very entertaining. Thank you. Jake said, most mortals who meet our family either faint or beg for mercy, Prince Demon continued. You just sit there and insult us. It's refreshing. I wasn't trying to insult anyone, Jake said. Of course you were, Prince Demon laughed. And you were right about some of it. We have gotten a bit set in our ways. Emperor Vorthik gave his son a sharp look. Do not encourage him. Why not? Prince Demon asked. When was the last time someone said something to you that you hadn't heard before? When was the last time anyone in this family was surprised by anything? Jake looked around the table. For immortal beings who ruled multiple star systems, they suddenly looked tired. He has a point, Princess Lirelei said quietly. Empress Seraphina put down her fork. Are you all taking his side? I'm not taking sides, Jake said. I'm just saying that maybe being immortal doesn't have to mean being bored. Emperor Vorthik sat down again. He stared at Jake for a long time. You know, he said finally, in 50,000 years, no one has ever called me boring before. I didn't call you boring, Jake said. I said you were stuck. What's the difference? Jake thought about this. Boring people can't help being boring. Stuck people just need someone to help them get unstuck. The Emperor smiled, and for the first time, it looked almost human. Very well, son-in-law, he said. You have 1 year to prove that your human ways can improve our ancient empire. If you succeed, we will consider adopting some of your suggestions. If you fail, ... What happens if I fail? Jake asked. Let's just say it will be very unpleasant, Empress Seraphina said sweetly. Jake looked at his new wife. Princess Lirelai nodded encouragingly. Deal, Jake said. He had no idea what he had just gotten himself into. Jake learned very quickly that marrying a vampire princess was more complicated than just saying, I do. 3 days after the dinner with his new family, he woke up to find his room full of angry aliens. You have caused a diplomatic crisis, Captain Rodriguez said. She was standing by his bed with her arms crossed, looking very unhappy. Behind her were Ambassador Claire Foster from the Earth Federation and 2 aliens Jake had never seen before. Good morning to you too, Jake said, sitting up in his huge black bed. Do you have any idea what you've done? Ambassador Foster asked. She was a tall woman with gray hair, who usually stayed calm in any situation. Today, she looked ready to explode. I got married? Jake said. You got married to the most powerful vampire in the galaxy, Captain Rodriguez said. Every alien species in this sector is freaking out. They think Earth is trying to form an alliance with the Sanguine Empire. One of the aliens stepped forward. It looked like a giant blue octopus wearing a spacesuit. I am Ambassador Krell of the Aquatic Federation, it said through a translator device. My people demand to know if Earth plans to help the vampires expand their territory. We don't even know what Earth plans, Ambassador Foster said, because someone decided to get married without asking anyone first. Jake rubbed his eyes. He was still getting used to his new vampire vision, and everything looked too bright and too sharp. Look, I didn't plan this. It just happened. It just happened? The other alien said. This one was tall and skinny, with purple skin and 4 arms. You accidentally married vampire royalty? Pretty much, yeah. The aliens looked at each other and made some sounds that the translator couldn't handle. The point is, Captain Rodriguez sighed, you need to fix this. The Earth Federation is getting calls from every government in the galaxy. Some want to form alliances with us. Others want to declare war before we get too powerful. And some, Ambassador Krell added, want to destroy Earth before the vampires can use it as a base to conquer more systems. Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. They want to destroy Earth? Several species are considering it, the purple alien said. I am General Zex of the Crystalline Collective. My people have fought the vampires for 1,000 years. If Earth becomes their ally, we may have no choice. But I'm not making Earth their ally, Jake said. I just married one of them. In vampire culture, marriage creates political bonds between families, Ambassador Foster explained. By marrying Princess Lirelai, you've essentially made Earth part of the vampire royal family. Jake put his head in his hands. This is getting really complicated. Yes, it is, Captain Rodriguez said. So what are you going to do about it? Before Jake could answer, the door opened and Princess Lirelai walked in. She was wearing a red dress today instead of black, and her silver hair was braided with small jewels that sparkled like stars. Good morning, husband, she said cheerfully. Then she noticed all the people in the room. Oh, are we having a meeting? These people are from Earth, Jake said. They're upset about our marriage. Princess Lirelai looked at the humans and aliens with interest. Why? Because your marriage has created an interstellar incident, Ambassador Foster said stiffly. Has it? Princess Lirelei seemed pleased by this. How exciting. We haven't had a good interstellar incident in decades. This is not exciting, General Zek said. This is dangerous. The balance of power in this galaxy has been stable for centuries. Your marriage threatens that balance. Princess Lirelei sat down on the edge of Jake's bed. I see. And what do you suggest we do about it? Get divorced, Captain Rodriguez said quickly. Impossible, Princess Lirelei said. Vampire marriages cannot be dissolved. Then we need to make it clear that Earth is not forming an alliance with the Vampire Empire, Ambassador Foster said. But we are family now, Princess Lirelei pointed out. Family helps each other. Jake could see this was not going well. Maybe we could have some kind of ceremony, he suggested. Something that shows other species that our marriage is personal, not political. What kind of ceremony? Ambassador Krell asked suspiciously. A wedding, Jake said. A real one, with representatives from every species in the galaxy. We could make it clear that this is about love, not conquest. Everyone stared at him. Love? Princess Lirelei asked, raising an eyebrow. Jake felt his face get hot. Well, eventually. Maybe. The point is, we could show everyone that this marriage is not a threat. A wedding would be unprecedented, General Zek said. No vampire royal has ever had a public ceremony with alien witnesses. Which is exactly why we should do it, Princess Lirelei said suddenly. She was smiling, and Jake could tell she liked the idea. It would be something completely new. Your parents will never agree to it, Ambassador Foster said. My parents love new ideas, Princess Lirelei said, especially if they annoy other people. 2 hours later, Jake found himself in the throne room again, facing Emperor Vorthik and Empress Seraphina. This time, there were also holographic displays showing alien leaders from across the galaxy. Everyone was talking at once, and most of them sounded angry. Silence. Emperor Vorthik commanded, and the room went quiet. Now, what is this about a wedding? Jake stepped forward. Your Majesty, our marriage has caused some concerns among other species. They're worried that Earth is becoming your ally. Are they? The Emperor asked with amusement. Some are threatening to attack Earth, Jake continued. Others want to form alliances with us. Everyone is scared that the balance of power is changing. Good, Empress Seraphina said. Fear keeps people polite. But we don't want a war, Jake said. So I suggested we have a public wedding ceremony. Something that shows everyone our marriage is personal, not political. Emperor Vorthik leaned back in his throne. A public ceremony with alien witnesses. Yes, sir. No vampire royal has ever done such a thing. I know, sir. That's kind of the point. The Emperor looked at the holographic displays showing all the angry alien leaders. Then he looked at Jake. Then he started laughing. Brilliant, he said. Absolutely brilliant. It is? Jake asked. Don't you see? The Emperor said. For thousands of years, other species have been afraid of us because we were mysterious. They didn't understand our culture or our intentions. But a public wedding, that makes us seem normal, relatable, almost harmless. Harmless? Empress Seraphina asked. Relatively speaking, the Emperor said. And while they're busy watching our wedding and thinking we've gone soft, we'll learn everything about their cultures, their weaknesses, their fears. Jake realized he might have just made things worse instead of better. Of course, the Emperor continued, we'll need to make sure the ceremony respects both human and vampire traditions. What are vampire wedding traditions? Jake asked nervously. Princess Lirelei smiled. Well, traditionally, we sacrifice the population of a small moon to ensure good luck. We're not doing that, Jake said quickly. We also drink the blood of our enemies, Empress Seraphina added. Nope. And the bride and groom must prove their worthiness by surviving 3 trials of combat, Emperor Vorthik said. Absolutely not. The royal family looked disappointed. So what do humans do at weddings? Princess Lirelei asked. Jake thought about this. We exchange rings. We make promises to each other. We have a party with food and dancing. We cut a cake. That's it? Prince Demon asked. He had appeared from somewhere and was listening with interest. Pretty much. How boring, Empress Seraphina said. But we could make it more interesting, Jake said quickly, seeing an opportunity. We could have the ceremony on a neutral space station. We could invite representatives from every species. The galaxy. We could have food from 100 different worlds. And dancing? Princess Lirelei asked. Lots of dancing, she smiled. I like dancing. We could make it the biggest diplomatic event in galactic history, Jake continued. A celebration of unity and peace. Emperor Vorthik stroked his chin thoughtfully. A gathering of every species. In one place. All of our potential enemies in the same room. All of our potential friends, Jake corrected. Same thing, the Emperor said with a grin that showed his fangs. Over the next few weeks, planning the wedding became the most complicated thing Jake had ever done. Every species had different requirements. The fire-breathing draconians needed the temperature kept above 200 degrees. The ice-dwelling glacians needed it below freezing. The energy beings from the Vortex Nebula couldn't exist in normal matter, so they needed special containment fields, and that was just the environmental requirements. The dietary needs were even more complicated. Some species ate only light, others ate only darkness. A few ate mathematics, which Jake didn't even know was possible. How are we going to feed everyone? He asked Dr. Walsh during one of their planning meetings. Very carefully, the doctor said, looking at his notes. The good news is that most species can survive on synthesized nutrients for a few hours. The bad news is that if we get the chemistry wrong, we might accidentally poison half the galaxy. No pressure, Jake muttered. The location was another problem. No existing space station was big enough to hold representatives from every known species. The vampires offered to build a new one, but that made everyone nervous. Earth offered to host it, but that made the vampires nervous. Finally, Princess Lirelei had an idea. What about a ship? She suggested during one of their meetings. Not a station, but a moving vessel. We could travel to different systems during the ceremony, showing that we're not claiming any particular territory. A wedding ship, Jake said. I like it. It would need to be huge, Captain Rodriguez pointed out. We have some large vessels, Emperor Vorthik said. The Imperial Dreadnought Eternal Night is 200 kilometers long. That might work, Jake said. Planning the actual ceremony was even harder than the logistics. Human wedding traditions were simple, but vampire customs were complex and bloody. They compromised by creating something entirely new, instead of sacrificing a moon. They would plant trees on a dead planet, bringing life instead of death. Instead of drinking enemy blood, they would share wine made from fruit grown on Earth and the vampire homeworld. Instead of trials of combat, they would compete in games that showcased both human creativity and vampire strength. I think this might actually work, Jake told Princess Lirelei one evening as they walked through the castle gardens. The plants here grew without sunlight, fed by some kind of vampire magic that made them glow with soft purple light. Are you nervous? She asked. Terrified, Jake admitted. What if something goes wrong? What if the different species start fighting? What if someone tries to assassinate us during the ceremony? Princess Lirelei stopped walking and turned to face him. In the purple light of the glowing plants, she looked like something from a fairy tale. Jake, she said seriously, do you regret challenging me that night? Jake thought about this. A month ago, He had been a simple diplomat. Now he was immortal, married to vampire royalty, and planning the biggest wedding in galactic history. His life had become completely insane. "No," he said, and realized he meant it. "I don't regret it." "Good," she said, and kissed him. God, it was their first real kiss, and Jake felt that same electrical feeling he had experienced when they got married. But this time, it felt less like magic and more like something real. When they broke apart, Princess Lirelei smiled. "Besides," she said, "what's the worst that could happen?" Jake decided not to answer that question. The wedding was supposed to solve everything. Instead, it made everything worse. Jake stood on the bridge of the eternal night, watching through the massive windows as ships from across the galaxy arrived for the ceremony. There were sleek Earth vessels, crystalline ships that looked like flying jewels, and organic vessels that seemed to be alive. Some ships were so alien that Jake couldn't tell which end was the front. "Impressive turnout," Princess Lirelei said, joining him at the window. She was wearing a white dress that sparkled like starlight, a compromise between human and vampire wedding traditions. "Yeah," Jake said. "Now I just hope they don't all start shooting at each other." "Where's your sense of adventure?" she asked. With a smile, Jake had discovered that his wife had a strange idea of what was fun. Most people would be nervous about hosting the biggest diplomatic event in galactic history. Princess Lirelei seemed to be treating it like a party. The wedding ceremony itself went better than Jake had expected. Nobody tried to assassinate anyone. The environmental systems managed to keep everyone alive despite having completely different atmospheric needs. The food synthesis worked, mostly. The only real problem came when the energy beings from the Vortex Nebula tried to give a wedding speech and accidentally created a small black hole. But Dr. Walsh managed to collapse it before it sucked in the cake table. "That was beautiful," Princess Lirelei said as they watched the last of the wedding guests leave. "I especially liked the part where Ambassador Krell cried." "I don't think he was crying," Jake said. "I think he was leaking hydraulic fluid from his emotional processors." Same thing. Jake had to admit the wedding had been a success. Representatives from 73 different species had attended. There had been no diplomatic incidents, no wars declared, and no one had died. For an interstellar gathering, that was practically a miracle. But the real success was something Jake hadn't expected. During the reception, he had spent hours talking to aliens from across the galaxy, and many of them had told him the same thing. "Your people have an interesting perspective," General Zex had said. The purple-skinned warrior had been suspicious of humans at first, but after a few hours of conversation, he seemed almost friendly. Most species become rigid as they age. But humans... you change constantly. "It's because we don't live very long," Jake had explained. "We have to adapt quickly, or we die." "Perhaps that is why the vampires chose to ally with you," General Zex had mused. "They have lived so long, they have forgotten how to change." That conversation stuck with Jake. Over the next few weeks, as he settled into his new life as vampire royalty, he started to notice things about the Sanguine Empire that bothered him. The Empire ruled over 17 star systems with billions of subjects. Most of these subjects were not vampires. They were other species that had been conquered thousands of years ago. And they were treated badly. Jake saw it first when he visited one of the agricultural worlds that supplied food for the vampire fleet. The local species, called the Zerani, were small blue-skinned people who had once been farmers. Now they were essentially slaves, forced to grow crops for their vampire masters. "How long have they been working for the Empire?" Jake asked Prince Demon as they toured the planet. "About 8,000 years, Prince Demon said casually. "They were one of Father's early conquests." 8,000 years? Jake stared at the Zerani workers in the fields. They looked tired and sad. Don't they ever get a break? They get rest periods, Prince Demon said, and they're well fed. Most conquered species don't get such good treatment. Jake thought about this. On Earth, no government had lasted more than a few hundred years. The idea of the same system continuing unchanged for 8,000 years seemed wrong. Have you ever asked them if they want to do something else? Jake asked. Prince Demon looked confused. Why would we ask them that? Over the next few months, Jake visited more worlds in the Vampire Empire. He saw the same thing everywhere. Species that had been conquered long ago, forced to do the same jobs their ancestors had done for thousands of years. No one ever asked them what they wanted. No one ever gave them choices, and the vampires didn't seem to see anything wrong with this. It's the natural order, Emperor Vorthik explained when Jake brought up the subject. The strong rule the weak. We conquered them, so they serve us. It's very simple. But what if they don't want to serve you anymore? Jake asked. Then they should have fought harder when we invaded, Empress Seraphina said. Jake realized that his new family were not just ancient and set in their ways. They were also kind of terrible people. The worst part was that Jake was now part of it. As Princess Liralay's husband, he was technically a member of the vampire royal family. He had a say in how the empire was run. But every time he suggested changes, the other vampires looked at him like he was crazy. You want to give the conquered species voting rights? Emperor Vorthik asked during one family dinner. I want to give them choices, Jake said. Let them decide what jobs they want to do. Let them elect their own local leaders. Let them have some control over their own lives. That's ridiculous, Empress Seraphina said. They wouldn't know how to handle that kind of responsibility. How do you know if you've never tried? Because we've been ruling them for thousands of years, Prince Demon said. If they were capable of self-government, they would have done it before we conquered them. Jake felt his temper rising. His new vampire abilities made his emotions stronger, and sometimes it was hard to stay calm. Maybe they didn't have the chance, he said. Maybe they would have developed better governments if you hadn't invaded them. The room went quiet. Even the servants stopped moving. Are you criticizing our ancestors? Emperor Vorthik asked in a dangerous voice. I'm criticizing the system, Jake said. Just because something worked 8,000 years ago doesn't mean it's the best way to do things now. Our ways have brought peace and stability to 17 star systems, Empress Seraphina said coldly. Your ways have brought fear and slavery. Jake shot back. Princess Liralay put her hand on Jake's arm. Maybe we should discuss this later, she said quietly, but Jake was too angry to stop. No, let's discuss it now. I've been to a dozen worlds in your empire, and you know what I've seen? People who are miserable. People who have given up hope. People who do the same meaningless jobs their great-grandparents did because nobody ever asked them what they wanted to do with their lives. Emperor Vorthik stood up slowly. When he spoke, his voice filled the room like thunder. You have been part of this family for 4 months, he said. 4 months. I have been building this empire for 50,000 years. And you think you understand it better than I do? I think I understand freedom better than you do, Jake said, standing up too. The Emperor's eyes went completely black. Freedom is chaos. Freedom is war. Freedom is species destroying each other because they cannot agree. On simple things, we brought order to this galaxy. You brought tyranny. For a moment, Jake thought the Emperor was going to kill him right there. The air in the room seemed to vibrate with barely controlled power. Then, surprisingly, the Emperor smiled. Very well, he said. You think our ways are wrong. Prove it. What? I challenge you to a contest, Emperor Vorthik said. You have 1 year to try your human methods on one of our worlds. Pick any planet in the Empire. Try to improve it using your ideas about freedom and choice and democracy. If you succeed, we will consider adopting your methods across the entire empire. And if I fail? Jake asked. If you fail, you will never question our ways again. And you will formally apologize to every species you have insulted by suggesting they deserve better treatment. Jake looked around the room. Princess Lirelei was watching him with worry in her eyes. Prince Demon looked curious. Empress Seraphina looked like she was already planning his funeral, but Jake had seen too much to back down now. He had seen the sadness in the eyes of the conquered species. He had heard the hopelessness in their voices. He couldn't just ignore that. Deal, he said. Emperor Vorthic's smile got wider, showing his fangs. Excellent. Which world would you like to try to fix? Jake thought about all the planets he had visited. Most of them had been under vampire rule for thousands of years. The populations were used to following orders and not thinking for themselves. It would be hard to change that dot. Then he remembered one world that had been different. A planet called Kepler-7, inhabited by a species called the Molani. They had only been conquered 300 years ago, which was recent by vampire standards. And when Jake had visited, he had seen something in their eyes that was missing from the other conquered species, anger. Kepler-7, he said. Emperor Vorthic nodded. An interesting choice. The Morlani are ... difficult subjects. They have never fully accepted our rule. Maybe that's because your rule is wrong, Jake said. Or maybe it's because they're stubborn and foolish, Empress Seraphina said. They have caused us more trouble than any 10 other species combined. Which is why they're perfect for your experiment, Emperor Vorthic said. If you can make them happy and productive using your methods, it will be very impressive indeed. Jake realized he might have just made a huge mistake, but it was too late to back out now. When do I start? He asked. Tomorrow, the Emperor said. You will go to Kepler-7 with full authority to change whatever you want. But remember, you have 1 year. If the planet is not significantly improved by then, you lose. That night, Jake lay in his bed staring at the ceiling. Princess Lirelei was next to him, reading something on a holographic display. Are you sure about this? She asked, without looking up from her reading. No, Jake said honestly. I'm terrified. What if I make things worse? What if you make things better? Jake turned to look at her. Do you think I'm crazy for trying this? Princess Lirelei put down her display and turned to face him. I think you're the first person in 1,000 years to suggest that maybe we could do things differently. And I think that's either very brave or very stupid. Which do you think it is? She smiled and kissed him. Both, but I'm going with you. Anyway, you're coming to Kepler-7? Of course. You're my husband. And besides, she added with a grin that showed her fangs, this sounds like fun. Jake decided that Princess Lirelei had a very strange idea of what was fun. Kepler-7 was a mess. Jake stood on the landing platform of the planet's capital city and looked around at the chaos. The Morlani were running in every direction, some carrying boxes, others carrying weapons. Buildings were burning in the distance, and he could hear shouting and explosions coming from the streets. This is what happens when you announce that. You're coming to change everything, Princess Lirelei said, stepping off their ship behind him. People get excited. This isn't excitement, Jake said, watching a group of Morlani throw rocks at a government building. This is a riot. The Morlani were tall, thin people with green skin and forearms. They had been farmers and artists before the vampires conquered them 300 years ago. Now they were forced to work in factories that produced weapons for a vampire fleet. Sir, a voice called from across the platform. Jake turned to see a young Morlani running toward them. He was wearing the uniform of a local administrator, but it was torn and dirty. I am Kellen, the Morlani said, breathing heavily. "I was sent to meet you. But as you can see, we have a small problem." "What kind of problem?" Jake asked. "When word spread that you were coming to reform our world, different groups phoned different ideas about what that meant," Helen explained. "Some think you're going to free us from vampire rule completely. Others think you're going to make us work even harder. A few groups think you're here to punish us for causing trouble over the years." "And they're all fighting about it?" Princess Lirale asked. "Essentially, yes." Jake rubbed his forehead. He had been on the planet for 5 minutes, and things were already going wrong. "Okay," he said. "First thing, we need to stop the fighting. Can you get all the different group leaders in one place?" "They won't come," Kellen said. "They don't trust each other." "Then we go talk to them separately," Jake said. "How many groups are there?" 12, Kellen said. "Maybe 13 if you count the ones who think this is all a vampire trick." It took Jake 3 days to meet with all the different Morlani factions. Each group had different complaints and different ideas about what needed to change. The farmers wanted to go back to growing food instead of making weapons. The artists wanted to create beautiful things again instead of propaganda posters. The workers wanted better living conditions and shorter hours. But they all agreed on one thing. They hated being told what to do by people who didn't understand their culture. "For 300 years, the vampires have made all our decisions for us," said Vera, the leader of the farmer faction. "We're not allowed to choose what crops to grow. We're not allowed to choose where to live. We're not even allowed to choose what names to give our children. The worst part is that they don't even know us," added Marcus, who spoke for the artists. "They see us as just another conquered species. They don't care about our history or our traditions or our dreams." Jake listened to complaint after complaint. The Morlani had been treated like machines for 3 centuries, expected to work efficiently, but not allowed to think or feel or want anything for themselves. "So what do you want me to do?" Jake asked during a meeting with all the faction leaders. It had taken him a week to get them in the same room without fighting. "Give us our freedom," Vera said immediately. "I can't do that," Jake said. "I don't have the authority to remove Kepler-7 from the Vampire Empire." "Then what can you do?" Marcus asked angrily. Jake thought about this. He had spent years as a diplomat, and he had learned that the best solutions usually came from the people who actually had to live with them. "I can give you choices," he said finally. "I can't free you from the Empire, but I can let you decide how to run your own world within the Empire." The room went quiet. The Morlani leaders looked at each other with confusion. "What does that mean?" asked Beth, who represented the factory workers. "It means you get to vote," Jake said. "You elect your own local government. You decide what laws to make and how to enforce them. You choose what jobs you want to do and how to organize your society." "But we still have to serve the Vampire Empire?" Vera asked. "Yes, but you get to decide how. Instead of being told exactly what to produce and how to produce it, you negotiate. You make agreements that work for both sides." The Morlani leaders talked among themselves in their own language for several minutes. Jake couldn't understand what they were saying, but he could tell they were arguing. Finally, Marcus turned back to him. "This has never been tried before?" "Not in the Vampire Empire," Jake said. "But it works for humans. We have hundreds of different governments on hundreds of different worlds. They all have to work together, but each one gets to decide its own local rules." "And the vampires agreed to this?" Beth asked suspiciously. "Emperor Vorthik agreed to let me try it here," Jake said. "If it works, he might let other worlds do the same thing." Over the next month, Jake helped the Morlani set up their first election in 300 years. It was chaotic and confusing, and sometimes frustrating, but it was also exciting. The different factions had to learn how to compromise. The farmers wanted to turn all the weapon factories back into farms. The workers wanted to keep some factories, but make them safer and more comfortable. The artists wanted to use some of the factory space for studios and galleries. After weeks of debate, they came up with a plan that gave everyone some of what they wanted. Half the factories would be converted to farms. A quarter would continue, making weapons, but with better conditions for the workers. The remaining quarter would become spaces for art and education and community gatherings. "It's not perfect," Vera admitted during one of the planning meetings. "I wanted more farmland, and I wanted more art spaces," Marcus said. "But it's better than having no choice at all." The election itself was held 3 months after. Jake arrived on Kepler 7. 70% of the adult Morlani population voted, choosing representatives for a new planetary council. But the real test came when the new government had to negotiate with the Vampire Empire about production quotas. "They want us to produce the same amount of weapons as before." The newly elected president, a former factory supervisor named David, told Jake after the first negotiation session, "But we're converting half the factories to farms." "So negotiate," Jake said. "Offer them something else." "Like what?" Jake had been thinking about this. During his travels through the Vampire Empire, he had noticed that most of the conquered worlds produced the same basic things: weapons, raw materials, and food. Nobody specialized in anything unique. "What are the Morlani good at?" he asked. David looked confused. "What do you mean? Before the vampires conquered you, what were your people known for? What made Morlani culture special?" David thought about this. "We were famous for our art and our farming techniques, and ... He paused. "We were the best engineers in this part of the galaxy. Morlani-built ships were faster and more efficient than anything else." "There you go," Jake said. "Offer to build them better ships instead of more weapons." The negotiation took 2 weeks, but eventually the vampires agreed. The Morlani would produce fewer basic weapons, but would design and build advanced starships for the vampire fleet. It was work that required creativity and skill, not just mindless labor. The results were impressive. Within 6 months, Morlani designed ships were outperforming standard vampire vessels by 30%. The Morlani workers were happier because they were doing interesting work. The vampire military was happier because they had better equipment. But Jake's biggest success came from an unexpected source: marriage. Counseling. It started when he noticed that many of the Morlani seemed stressed about their personal relationships. 300 years of oppression had made it hard for people to trust each other or communicate openly. "We've forgotten how to talk to each other," David explained. "When you're not allowed to make any real decisions for centuries, you stop practicing how to compromise and negotiate." Jake remembered something from his diplomatic training. On Earth, we have people called counselors who help couples and families learn to communicate better. Maybe we could try something like that here. The idea was so strange that most of the Morlani thought Jake was joking at first. But a few couples agreed to try it, and the results were remarkable. When people learned to talk openly about their problems and work together to solve them, their relationships improved dramatically. More importantly, the communication skills they learned in counseling sessions helped them in their new democratic government. Council meetings became more productive. Negotiations with the vampire authorities went more smoothly. Even workplace disputes were resolved more quickly. "It's like we're remembering how to be people again," Vera told Jake during one of their regular check-in meetings. "For so long we were just workers. Now we're citizens. We're individuals. We're families." The news of Kepler 7's transformation spread throughout the Vampire Empire. Other conquered species began asking if they could try similar reforms. Some vampire nobles complained that Jake was causing trouble. But the results spoke for themselves. Production efficiency on Kepler-7 had increased by 40%. Crime rates had dropped to almost zero. The planet was generating more tax revenue for the Empire than it had in decades. And for the first time in 300 years, there were no rebel uprisings or terrorist attacks. Emperor Vorthik arrived for his inspection, exactly 1 year after Jake had started the experiment. He brought with him Empress Seraphina, Prince Demon, and a team of vampire bureaucrats to evaluate the results. Impressive, the Emperor said as they toured the new capital city. The Morlani had rebuilt it using their traditional architectural styles, and it was beautiful, all flowing curves and gardens and artwork integrated into the buildings themselves. The crime statistics are particularly noteworthy, one of the bureaucrats reported. Violent crime has decreased by 95%. Theft is down 80%. Even minor infractions like public intoxication have virtually disappeared. And production? Empress Seraphina asked. Up 40% overall, another bureaucrat said. The new starship designs have exceeded all performance expectations. What about loyalty? Emperor Vorthik asked. Are they planning to rebel? Jake smiled. Why don't you ask them yourself? They were standing in the central square, and a crowd of Morlani had gathered to see the vampire emperor. Jake had expected them to look scared or angry, but instead, they seemed curious and even friendly. Your Majesty, President David said, stepping forward. On behalf of the people of Kepler-7, I want to thank you for allowing us to try this experiment. Emperor Vorthik looked surprised. Thank me? Yes. For the first time in 300 years, we feel like we're contributing something valuable to the Empire, instead of just being used by it. We're proud of the ships we're building for your fleet. We're proud of the improvements we've made to our world. And you have no desire to leave the Empire? Empress Seraphina asked suspiciously. David looked at the other Morlani and then back at the royal family. Why would we want to leave? This is our home now. The Empire is our family, even if it's a complicated family sometimes. That evening, Jake sat with the vampire royal family in the guest palace that the Morlani had built for their visit. I admit I'm impressed, Emperor Vorthik said. I expected this world to be in chaos by now. I expected them to demand independence. Empress Seraphina added. I expected it to be boring, Prince Demon said. But those new ship designs are actually pretty cool. So, do I win the bet? Jake asked. Emperor Vorthik was quiet for a long moment. Yes, he said finally. You win. But now I have a new challenge for you. What's that? I want you to do this for the entire Empire. All 17 star systems. All 300 conquered worlds. Jake nearly choked on his drink. All of them? You've proven that your methods work, the Emperor said. Now prove that they can work everywhere. That's a huge job. Yes, it is. Which is why I'm promoting you. Emperor Vorthik smiled, showing his fangs. Congratulations, son-in-law. You're now the Imperial Minister of Democratic Reform. Princess Lirelei laughed and kissed Jake's cheek. I told you this would be fun. Jake looked out the window at the lights of the Morlani city below. Somewhere out there were 300 other worlds full of people who had been waiting centuries for someone to ask them what they wanted. It was going to be a lot of work. But for the first time since he had accidentally married a vampire princess, Jake felt like he knew exactly what he was supposed to be doing. Okay, he said, let's democratize a galactic empire. That's my husband, Princess Lirelei said proudly. Always thinking big. Jake realized that being married to vampire royalty was turning out to be the best mistake he had ever made.